you so much. Melbourne is hot today. Eh? I left camera, not so hot, more cold. Dear friends, dear President of the Institute, dear Greg, dear guest, dear Telmo Langiler, you are a speaker in Victoria. Thank you, Telmo, for being here. Thank you for your invitation to talk on Cuba. I want to talk with you as a normal Cuban, more in academic perspective, not as real ambassador. I want to talk to you as friends. We planified this conference, but Mr. Obama don't inform us that he will be in Cuba in these days. There are a lot of news you saw in TV or you could see in the newspapers. And my Minister of Foreign Affairs will talk tomorrow around 8 a.m. in the morning here in Australia. For this today, in the preparation of the visit of Obama, I will talk very careful because we continue every minute in different negotiations with the United States after 500 years of negotiation with them. I don't like read my ideas, but it's better for fix some point. And after I wait the best of this conference, your questions. I hope you don't sleep in the next 30 minutes. So sorry for my Latin, Cuban, salsa, mojito English. I'm sure you will try to understand me. Some Australian friends before my departure from Cuba told me, don't worry, Ambassador, Australians talk English as Cubans talk Spanish. For this, as we are champions of language, I'm sure you will try to understand me. About Cuba. The triumph of the Cuban Revolution was one of the most important events of the 20th century in the American continent and became the symbol of independence and humanism for millions of peoples all over the world. The political, economic, commercial, and media war against Cuba has not impeded the Cuban people to obtain great success. I want to talk about some of them. The 2015 report on human development made by the United Nations Development Program recognized the high level of human development in Cuba. The process of updating the Cuban economic model continues, keeping in mind the challenge that this poses in terms for our culture and for ideological relation with the United States. The private sector is expanding in Cuba. More than 500 people are working in the private sector today and continues increasing. There are a new international investment law which inaugurated the first special economic zone. Cuba's foreign debt was renegotiated in the Paris Club. We will maintain free and universal access to all levels of education and for health. The Cuban pharmaceutical industry produces and exports 2,000 products, we are testing now around 28 medicines against cancer. Our life expectancy is 79 years old. Cuba now provides medical assistance to 67 countries. 50,000 Cubans are in other countries working for health, including in Pacific Islands, very near Australia, in Vanuatu, in Kiribati, and other Pacific Islands. Every year, dozens of doctors from those countries are graduating from medical schools in Cuba. The Operation Miracle, silenced by corporate media, has allowed for 2.6 million of surgical interventions in 30 nations of Africa and Latin American countries. The Latin American School of Medicine has graduated more than 30,000 doctors in the last 10 years of 100 countries, including poor people of the United States. With the literacy campaign, Yes I Can, implemented in 30 countries all over the world, we have educated more than 10 million people. In Australia, we are cooperating with small inland communities of Aboriginals. More than 1,200 Cuban teachers are collaborating in 20 countries in this program. More than 7,000 students we have in 30 art academies in Cuba. We have a liberal art university with hundreds of international students. Despite the blockade, the Cuban government has planned a digital service program which includes a complete service for our telecommunications network and our access to internet. They tell we don't give access to internet, but they blockade our access to internet. Cuba is a multicultural and integrated society. We have a mix of all races and many different religions. Cuba respects all types of sexual preference which coexist in our country in total harmony. Cuba has empowered women and Afro-Cubans. Today, 48 of members of parliament are women. More than half of them are Afro-Cubans. Many have been named ministers, deputy ministers, and ambassadors. Same-sex marriage has been legal in our country for a number of years. In our country, we guarantee the same rights to all couples, regardless of sexual preference. Cuba has our own electoral system, which allows no propaganda. It is also free of corruption and big interest. It reflects our reality. Cuba defends and respects human rights has been recognized by the United Nations through an integral analysis of them. At the United Nations, 191 out of the 193 countries condemned the US blockade against Cuba during the General Assembly meeting this past October. There won't be a normalization of ties until the blockade ends. Guantanamo is returned to Cuba, and the act of interference in our domestic affairs stop. We recognize the efforts and measures undertaken by President Obama and welcome him in Havana. Majority of candidates to the President of the United States are with that Congress needs to finish the policy of blockade. After years, we continue in international affairs. Cuba is working with the warring parties in Colombia for try to finish an historical agreement for peace in Havana. We are very near of this historical agreement. Cuba is still committed to world peace, nuclear disarmament, and the diverse cause of social justice in the development world. We continue supporting the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela, and we continue supporting Palestine. Dear friends, the Cuban people are convinced that only our unity will preserve our independent nation and our social and economic achievement. We will undertake every change necessary to improve the living conditions of our people. Some academic circles are talking maybe Cuba will be next Singapore in Caribbean Sea. Why? In my opinion, there are strong points in favor of this idea. One, patriotism and internationalism of Cuban people, a strong culture and culture of resistance. Two, very high education level. Three, universal free access to education and health. Four, thanks to blockade, we have impressive success in producing medicines. It's imminent the world attention on the production of Cuban vaccines in favor of humanity. We are sure we have good reserve of oil, and in the next future we will discover a good area for exploration, for exploitation. Tourists increase now in around 500 persons every year, but the first year who United States permit their citizens go to Cuba, we wait around 3 to 4 millions of Americans. Step by step, Cuban economy will increase more fast every year, based in our opportunities and more foreign investment. Cuba practices real solidarity in all the world. Cuba is really open to the world from 1959. Now, many people is discovering real Cuba. Propaganda against Cuba now is a boomerang in favor of Cuba. Particular Cuban way of life is very attractive to the people in the world. All these points and more are in favor of Cuba. Cuba and Australia. Our two countries are writing a new chapter in the history of our growing fraternal ties. Every year, Australia is supporting Cuba against blockade. Thanks for this. Now it's time for do business in Cuba. We have an agreement in exploration on Cuban oil in Cuba with one enterprise of Melbourne. As we speak, the first great Australian trade delegation, headed by Mr. Andrew Robb, was in Havana in February, and Professor Adrian Herr will talk to you after about the result of this mission. We continue supporting the Cuban program Yes I Can, and I hope it's the moment for expand, and there are conditions in Australian side for expand this program. We are ready for more cooperation with Australia in Pacific Islands. Recently, we signed an agreement on sport and others between our two Olympic committees. This is happening when we are celebrating the 150th anniversary of the arrival of the first Cuban to Australia, who arrived in March. In February, we gave the Cuban Awards for the first time before the great sea of friendship with many Australians receive us Cubans. We recognized to new and old friends. A lot of Australians done a fantastic job as friends and as ambassadors of our culture and our people. Our friend Tamo have one of these Cuban awards in February. Friends of Cuba come in all kinds, from the left, from the center, from the right, from Aboriginal communities. Our role is to work with all who offer their hand in help to Cuba. And there are a lot of people in Australia helping and loving Cuba. Australian people is voting for Cuba. Australian tourists to Cuba grew 60% last year. In this year, in January, Australian tourists grew to 79%, and in February up to 72%. In 2000, last year, we worked in establishing the Australia-Cuba Business Council, the parliamentary group of friendship in the federal parliament, composed of 28 members, and the Australia-Cuba Cultural Alliance. We hope increase the number of BIPs, very important persons exchanging visits to Cuba and to Australia. And really, we hope the government of Australia and allies open an embassy in Cuba. More and more musical bands and dancers from Cuba will arrive to Australia this year. Among other activities, they will participate in a great Cuban festival in November in Melbourne. This November, Australia will organize an international rugby championship in Cuba, for which 600 people from different countries have already confirmed their participation the same month. And La Habana will host a festival of Aboriginal Australian culture. Cuba and Australia exemplify the respect and friendship that can exist between a big country and a small one. Cuba and Australia are about to write even more chapters in their history of friendship and sympathy, not only among us, but also supporting our brothers in the Pacific Islands, in the Caribbean, and anywhere in the world where we are needed. Please be happy as we Cubans are. Thank you very much.